Have you ever really stopped to think about what law actually is? I mean, not just the rules we see in a book, but the deep philosophical code running underneath it all, the very thing that shapes our entire world. Let's dive in and take a look at the code behind the law.
Abraham Lincoln put it beautifully. He saw law as this accumulation of reason, of wisdom, passed down through the ages. It's a really powerful idea, right? That law isn't just some random set of commands, but the product of centuries of human thought, always being tested and refined.
Okay, but that brings up a really basic question. If law is the answer, what was the problem to begin with? Why can't we all just, get along without it?
Well, it turns out the reason we need law is because we've never really agreed on who we are as people. It's a fundamental dilemma, a debate that's been raging for thousands of years.
It really boils down to this. Are people, at their core, good? Thinkers like Ovid and Seneca thought so. And if that's true, maybe we can be left to our own devices. Or are we naturally vicious, as the ancient Chinese legists argued? If that's the case, then we absolutely need the law to control our worst impulses. This one single disagreement, this is the engine that drives the entire concept of law.
But of course, it's not that simple. It gets way more complicated. Because even if we all agree that, yeah, we need laws, what happens when those laws clash with our own personal sense of right and wrong?
I think most of us feel this. We have this internal compass, this desire to do good in the world. We want to do what feels right.
And here's the rub. This is where we hit a major wall. The law tells us what we have to do, but our conscience, our morality, tells us what we should do. And believe me, those two things are not always on the same page.
This brings us all the way back to Socrates. His take was pretty hardcore. He argued you have to obey the law, even an unjust one. Why? Because the alternative is just chaos, right? A world where everyone just picks and chooses which laws to follow. Well, that's not a society, that's anarchy. For him, the system itself was more important.
But, and this is a huge but, what do you do when the laws themselves are just plain evil? I mean, the laws of Nazi Germany were, technically, the law. Should people have obeyed them? Absolutely not. And this is the very heart of the justification for civil disobedience. Sometimes breaking the law is the most moral thing you can do.
So this huge conflict between our conscience and the government's rules, it forces us to ask an even bigger question. What is the law even for? What's the end goal? Most people would say justice. But what does that word, justice, actually mean?
We've all seen the image, right? Lady Justice. She's blindfolded, so she can't be biased, and she's holding those scales to weigh everything fairly. The ideal, is that law and justice are basically the same thing. But is that really true in the real world?
So let's look at one take on it. The philosopher Robert Nozick had this entitlement theory. For him, justice wasn't about making sure everyone ends up with the same stuff. No. For him, justice was all about the process. Did you get what you have legally, without cheating or stealing? If yes, then the outcome is just. The how matters more than the what.
Nozick's theory is one way to think about it. But to build a whole legal system, you need something bigger, a whole framework. You can almost think of them as competing operating systems for society.
Now the two heavyweights, the Windows and macOS of legal theory, are natural law and legal positivism. Natural law folks, like Cicero, would say that an unjust law isn't really a law at all. It's just organized crime. But then the legal positivists, like Jeremy Bentham, fire right back. They say, look, law is just what the people in charge say it is, and all that talk about a higher moral law, Bentham famously called it nonsense upon stilts.
And it's not just a two-horse race. You've got all these other theories adding new layers. The sociological approach, for example, sees law as a tool for social engineering, a way to actively shape society by balancing everyone's competing interests. The point is, there's no single off-the-shelf operating system that everyone agrees on.
All these different theories really drive home a critical point. Law isn't some fixed thing carved in stone. It's a living, breathing system. And it's a system that we are all constantly helping to write.
I mean, just look at how the idea of citizenship has changed. Back in the 18th century, it was all about individual freedom and owning property. Fast forward to the 19th, and it's about the right to vote and participate in politics. Then in the 20th century, it expands again to include things like economic well-being and social security. What we expect the law to do for us is always evolving.
So you see, the law isn't some ancient monument we just have to accept. It's a living story. It's the story we tell ourselves about who we are and what we value.
It's our collective answer to all those huge questions we've been talking about. And it's a story that we are all writing, together, every single day.
Which really leaves us with one last massive question. If the law really is our story, looking at the world we live in right now, with all its crazy new challenges, what's the next chapter we want to write? What story do we want to tell?